there, it's Lara back with your horoscopes for the new moon in Gemini that's happening on May 30th, 2022. Thanks for being here. These horoscopes will take you through to the Sagittarius full moon that happens on June 14th. And of course, I'll be back with your horoscopes for that lunation because I am here every new and full moon with these horoscopes. And every second week, I'm here with a shorter video where we cover a particular topic or question that you have, and I give you some astrological insight. Okay, so let's get right to it. We are crawling out of eclipse season. I don't know about you, but it can't come soon enough as far as I'm concerned. And reminding you though that this eclipse story that we are still in is playing out over the longer term for about an 18-month cycle. So this is not the last of these themes that have been stirred up by the last two eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio that we've just been through. But as I've said in the past two videos, when we have an eclipse, it sort of brings a crescendo point to the storyline, right? And then things will start to calm down a little bit, and all things being equal, and then we'll have another eclipse season in the fall where we'll have more eclipses in Scorpio and Taurus that will trigger that storyline once again, even though it's still playing out in the background, but it will be really illuminated again at that time. But right now what's happening is we are heading into a new moon. So we're in the waxing half of the lunar cycle, of the monthly lunar cycle right now, where we've had that full moon, blood moon eclipse in Scorpio, right? Total lunar eclipse that we had. And now we are heading towards a new moon. So the moon is waning. That is a sense of sort of wrapping things up before we move on to the next thing. And this particular new moon is in the mutable air sign of Gemini. I have a cat who's decided it's perfect time to play right beside me here on the floor. Anyways, hi Nigella. Maybe she'll come see us. So this new moon is happening in the mutable air sign of Gemini, and it is May 30th at 7:30 a.m. and that's Eastern time, so you can adjust for your time zone. And it's happening at 9 degrees 3 minutes of Gemini. Any new moon is an inception point, right? It's when the sun and the moon come together in the sky to birth something new or to conceive of something new. So it's the time where we can be intentional about what we want to grow. And the best way to do that is to focus on the house themes that, in this case, Gemini occupy in our chart. And I'm going to get to that when we get to the horoscopes. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry, we'll get there. So all of us has this opportunity to begin a new venture, plant a new idea, start something fresh, for something new to come into our experience or our awareness, because sometimes these are things that we don't necessarily intend, but the universe intends for us, right? Or we have some new kind of information, insight, what have you, that sparks a new idea or a new project or a new relationship or a new, you name it. All depends on what's going on in your personal chart. So like all new moons, this is an inception point. It is a point of conception and initiation. So the ruler of this new moon is Mercury, right? Because Mercury rules Gemini, not only Gemini, but also Virgo. It rules those two signs. And what's Mercury doing right now? Well, Mercury is retrograde. And in last week's Astro Nugget, I did a whole piece on Mercury retrograde. So if you haven't seen that, I'll drop the link below and you can check it out for more insight about that. So we have Mercury, the ruler of this lunation, of this new moon, is traveling backwards through the sky right now. At least as we perceive it on Earth. In that Mercury retrograde video, I explain that is actually an optical illusion. But we're not going to get into that here. So Mercury's retrograde. At the time of this new moon, it will have retrograde right back out of Gemini into Taurus, right? Retrograded from the air sign that it rules back into the earth sign where it was for a little while. And it's like, Mercury's going back to pick something up, to finish up some business that wasn't completed, tie up loose ends, review, reflect, all these things before moving forward again. So this is significant because Mercury's the ruler of this lunation. And Mercury retrograded May 10th at about between 4 and 5 degrees of Gemini. It will be retrograde until June 3rd. It will station direct at 26 degrees of Taurus. So it's moving back to 26 Taurus. And that happens before the full moon in Sagittarius, which is on the 14th. So before whatever is conceived of reaches that first point of fullness, Mercury will have station direct again and start building some forward momentum. This new moon in Gemini is the start of course, a 2-week cycle, like I've already mentioned, culminating at the full moon in Sagittarius on the 14th of June. But it's also the initiation of a 6-month cycle where we have the seeds planted at the Gemini new moon, so in the Gemini area of our chart, and that will grow to fullness over 6 months' time and will reach a point of culmination or bearing fruit or illumination or, all those concepts associated with full moons at the Gemini full moon, which happens on December 7th, 2022. So we're kicking off this not only 2-week cycle, but on a grander scale, a 6-month cycle. Now, one of the other things that's happening that's really important at the time of this lunation is that Mercury retrograde will be in a strong square with Saturn. Saturn doesn't seem to want to cut us any slack or give us a break. Saturn's been in the picture for a very long time, for years. And, we've got that constant triggering of the Saturn-Uranus square. Sorry. The Saturn-Uranus square that was the defining signature of 2021, right? So, and we know that it's going to come into almost an exact square again, Saturn in Aquarius, Uranus in Taurus, nearing the end of 2022. But this particular lunation is, once again, we're getting Saturn, needling us a little bit here, because a square is a conversation of tension. So the two planets involved, Mercury retrograde and Saturn, they are in a tense conversation. There is, it's sort of this feeling of like being between a rock and a hard place, or backed into a corner. And there's a sense of something's got to give to relieve the tension, right? We have to make a choice. We have to take some action. And ideally, that's the best way to deal with it, because if we choose to not address it, it will be addressed anyway, and maybe in ways that we would prefer it not to be, right? I mean, we can't always control everything, but forewarned is forearmed, right? Okay, so Saturn is going to be sitting at 25 degrees of Aquarius, and it's still in square with the nodes, which, as we know, if you've listened to past videos, the nodes are implicated in the eclipses. So it's triggering the nodal axis, right? Once again, that storyline of what's happened in the past, where we're headed in the future, what we need to release, what we are drawn or magnetized to, what needs purging, and what we have a voracious appetite for. I've spoken about these lunar node themes, in past videos, particularly when we were talking about the eclipses. So if you haven't listened to the last 2 horoscope videos on the solar eclipse in Taurus and the total lunar eclipse in Scorpio yet, I suggest you do that, because those videos are both still relevant. Those eclipse themes are not going anywhere. for the entirety of this year and, some of next year as well. So those are still relevant. So you can listen to those, and I'll pop the links below. And I talk more about the lunar nodes there. But so we've got Saturn squaring the lunar nodes and in a square with the ruler of the lunation, right? Mercury. Mercury is also, excuse me, in a conversation with Neptune at the time of this lunation. We've got Neptune in Pisces and Mercury in Gemini, and those two signs sextile each other. So Mercury and Neptune are in a sextile. A sextile is a conversation of opportunity. It is a friendly conversation between the planets where they can be a bit flirtatious, so to speak. And there's an opportunity offered up, but we kind of have to, we have to engage with that. And so I'm going to put all these pieces together for you and tell you, like, what does this all mean as it comes together? And then specifically, what does it mean for me, right? Or you? What does it mean for each sign, in other words? So I'm just having a look at my notes here. The one thing that I haven't mentioned yet that I did want to draw your attention to is, remember how I said that Mercury is going to station direct on the 3rd of June? So the ruler of this lunation is going to station direct on the 3rd, which is like, we're still going to be in that waxing half of the moon cycle. So it's relevant to whatever is initiated at the new moon on the 30th, right? So Mercury's going to station direct, and then the following day, Saturn, who's in square with Mercury at the time of this new moon, is going to retrograde. So there's something going on here, right? And the last thing I wanted to say before I kind of wrap it all up in a bow for you is that on June 10th, before the next full moon, so still part of this waxing moon phase, on June 10th, we've got Mercury retrograde, or Mercury trining Pluto in Capricorn. And that's at 28 degrees of Capricorn. So a lot of planets are making their last aspects to Pluto, or major aspects, as Pluto is nearing the end of its time in Capricorn. So something about that Pluto and Capricorn story, that deep evolution and transformation and alchemy that's been going on since Pluto's been in Capricorn, since like 2000, oh my gosh, I can't remember, a long time. Anyways, that story is kind of gradually coming to a close. Pluto will leave Capricorn on March 23rd, 2023 for a little bit. It will retrograde back in June of 2023, and then finally, it'll retrograde back and then move back on in 2024, in January 2024. So there's something significant there going on in terms of the ruler of this new moon, Mercury, having this sort of uplifting, hopeful, helpful, more easy flowing conversation with Pluto. And Pluto's not known for being particularly warm and fuzzy and easy and all of those things, right? But it's as if there is a last piece of information or communication. These are things Mercury represents, or idea, or thought, or teaching, or something surrounding technology, our brains, even moving parts. These are all mercurial themes. Commerce, that is coming into our awareness, and it's kind of allowing us to see how we can, like, the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of what Pluto has been transforming in our lives for these past many years. So I think since 2008. I can't remember the date, and I'm sorry that I didn't write that down. But so this story altogether, in terms of this new moon in Gemini, it's, once again, like I said, it's reminding us of the Saturnian work that we're being required to do as Saturn is making this slow journey through Aquarius for the last 2 years or so. And, it's not over yet, but it's this slow, steady grind, right? It is hard reality checks. It is the call for adulting. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking of a book called Elderhood in the Time of Trouble. And it's written by a Canadian named Stephen Jenkinson. He also wrote a book called Die Wise, very wise guy. And I mean that not in a joking way, but there's something that he has said, and I've posted it on social media before, but it really resonates with me. And it seems to really encapsulate the Saturnian journey that we've all been on, and that this particular new moon in Gemini is once again drawing to our attention. So he says, I'm saying as one grown up to another in troubled time, you have an obligation to be able to proceed minus any assurance that anything good will come of it. So that's, the hard truth of Saturn, that we have to do the adulting. We have to walk the road of maturity and responsibility and hard work, and we have to overcome the boundaries and the resistance, the traditions that are no longer serving us, the old ways that are no longer serving us, all of these themes, right? We have to be willing to do the work that it takes, even if we have no assurance that our work is going to be rewarded in the end. But the thing about Saturn is that if we do the work, Saturn doles out the rewards, right? Accordingly. And I don't mean the rewards in a big Jupiterian sense, like, everybody's going to win the lottery, but that sense of accomplishment of a job well done and hard work, that you've put in, that you reap the rewards for. Saturn is known as the Lord of Karma. So responsible for that whole notion of we kind of get out of something what we put into it, right? Now that could be a whole nother side ramble that I'm not going to go on, but that's the whole idea here, is that we really have to keep putting one foot in front of the other, even though we're not sure how everything's going to turn out in the end. Now, there's this like revisiting of some old themes, like I mentioned, because it's triggering that Saturn energy, right? And we've dealt with that a lot, but in a new way. Old themes are being triggered, but in a new way, and one that's kind of showing us the way forward. And I'm going to explain to you why that is. Because Neptune keeps also showing up in the equation, right? Remember I said to you, Neptune is sextile Mercury at the time of this new moon, and we had all that energy in Pisces. Neptune is in Pisces for the long haul, right? And we had so much going on there, triggering the Piscean area of our charts, and Neptune is still there. And Neptune is this very sort of elusive energy. It's like, if you've seen in movies or what have you, like the mystery person at the party that just keeps showing up on the periphery and is never really talking to anybody, but it's sort of, they're just hovering around and you don't really know what they're doing. So it's kind of like, this is what's going on with Neptune. Neptune is reminding us that somehow there is a kind of magic afoot, or perhaps deception. It sort of depends on where you stand, right? But Neptune is dissolving one reality to make way for a new one. And it's doing that in sometimes imperceptible ways, but if you're paying attention, you get that sense that something is being dissolved, right, to make way for something new. And in this case, whatever that new thing is, it corresponds to the Gemini area of our chart. Gemini is, as I mentioned, a mutable air sign. It is, the mutable signs are adaptable, changeable, malleable, unpredictable, sort of difficult to pin down. And they are the signs that are the transitory points in the year where we're transitioning between one season and another. And in this case, in the Northern Hemisphere, we're transitioning from spring to summer during Gemini season, right? Gemini is the sign of the twins. That's the symbol for Gemini. And so it's what we call a double-bodied sign, right? Some concepts or key words that are associated with Gemini are things like curious, social, communicative. Gemini, ruled by Mercury, it gathers and disseminates information, but it's more about the quantity of the information often, whereas Virgo is more concerned, also ruled by Mercury, with the quality of the information. Virgo picks through things and takes what it needs and discards the rest, whereas Gemini is like, give me all the information. And this might be useful to somebody, that might be useful to somebody, this might be useful to me. We're just taking in all the information that we can and maybe sharing all the information that we can, not always being discerning about it. So it reminds me of, again, way back, even before my time, where people, you had those newspaper, the kids that would stand on the corner and, extra, they sell newspapers, extra, read all about it. And that's kind of Gemini energy. Gemini is the social butterfly. It is, like I said, a double-bodied sign that deals with duality. Gemini is able to see both sides, right? Two sides of the story. There's this capacity to see it both ways, or to be of two minds when we're talking about Gemini. Saying, well, yes, this can be true, or this is true, but this is also true. Yes, I like this, but I also like this. Or like, these things are different, but they're also the same. That's how Gemini works. It can be, one of the more shadow side qualities of Gemini is that being kind of two-faced, right? And it's not in a way that's like, I'm not saying that it's intentional. It's just that, Gemini can go around having conversations and they're talking to one person or one group of people and going, yeah, I get how I can see how that's true. Yeah, I agree with you. But then, going to another person who might have different ideas about something and engaging in a conversation there, and then going, yeah, I can see how that's true. And maybe that person is wrong, or maybe you're both right. Or, so there can be that kind of idea that goes on with Gemini. So that's a little bit about Gemini and the qualities of that sign. And we may see these qualities at play in accordance with whatever is initiated at this new moon, right? The new moon, this particular new moon, will impact those people that have placements around, let's say, 6 to 12 degrees of the mutable signs, which are Gemini, Sagittarius, Pisces, and Virgo. So if you have your sun, your moon, your rising sign, particular placements around 6 to 12 degrees, the closer you get to 9 degrees, the more obvious it's going to be. But that those folks will experience this new moon on a more personal level. They'll feel it more obvious. So think about, at this time of the Gemini new moon on the 30th, right, and the few days following that, what new thing is being conceived of that might involve information, new ideas, communications, exchanges of information, being of two minds, learning or teaching something. All those themes that I mentioned earlier to you. And again, this will be in accordance with the house that Gemini occupies in your chart. And whatever this is, it might feel a bit daunting, a bit difficult, a bit stern or cold or mature or ambitious. It may require patience. And it might be related to, in some way, the material realm, right? Because we've got Saturn there in Aquarius, but Saturn also rules Capricorn, which deals, Capricorn's an earth sign. And Mercury, the ruler of this lunation, like I said, is retrograding back into Taurus, an earth sign. So the material realm in some way might be implicated. And it may also feel rather karmic or fated. And like I was saying to you, we can't forget that Neptune piece where there's this sense of an opportunity going on, but it's like something is dissolving to make way for something new, right? So I'm going to get to the horoscopes now for each sign. When you're listening, please listen first and foremost to your rising sign, if you know your rising sign, because that will be the most accurate and obvious to you, and sort of more reflective of what's going on in your earthly life. But you can also listen for your sun sign and your moon sign, because those will give you added nuance and added layers of information. You may resonate with your sun sign, definitely, or your moon sign. It sort of depends. Oftentimes people will resonate with their sun or their sun sign more if they're born during the day. So if they have a day chart, and they may resonate more with their moon sign if they're born at night, right? So if you have a night chart. But regardless, when you're listening to these kinds of horoscopes, listen to your rising sign first and foremost, if you can. And for those who are interested, I've had a couple people ask me this. I am using Tropical Western Astrology, and I'm using the whole sign house system. So that's my jam. And I also, for those of you interested, what I do in my practice is I combine both modern and ancient astrology. So I started out learning evolutionary astrology, and I studied with various people, including I took Mark Jones's program, and then I moved into learning Hellenistic astrology. So with Chris Brennan and some other people, so I combine those two in my practice, and I find that there is room for both. But I think that having the foundations of ancient astrology is really quite important. All right, so that out of the way, let's get into the horoscope for each sign. And I'm going to start, as I always do, with whatever sign this lunation is happening in. And in this case, that's Gemini. So we're starting with you, Gemini. This is your new moon. So if you are a Gemini sun, you're having a solar return during Gemini season, right? Happy birthday. If you are a Gemini rising, this new moon is happening in your first house. And that speaks to you. The first house represents the person, right? As a whole. So your physical embodiment, it's like the soul's physical, the ascendant is like the soul's physical embodiment on earth. So it is your physicality, it is also your personality, and your mind. So all of that wrapped up in a whole person. And so what happens in the first house tends to be significant for many areas of life because it's all about you. So this can have to do with your relationship to yourself. It can have to do with your physical body appearance, vitality. It can have to do with how you approach life, like how you come at the world, how you do life, how you steer your ship through life, and also how the world perceives you. So something is being initiated here that's all about you. This could be you intentionally taking on some new role or some new appearance. Sometimes it's simple things like we're changing our wardrobe or our hair, or sometimes it's something bigger, like we're talking about initiating a gender transition, or maybe it's something like some kind of surgery that you're having that impacts you physically in some way. It could be even something like something going on in your life causes other people to perceive you in a different way. So whatever seeds are being planted right now at this Gemini new moon, they directly involve you. So the piece that's a bit tricky here, like I was saying in the introduction, is that we've got Saturn squaring the lunation, right? Saturn in Aquarius is squaring the ruler of the lunation, which is Mercury, and Mercury will be in Taurus, another fixed sign. So there's something going on here that may feel a little bit like the phrase hard reset comes into mind for some reason. Something that's requiring you to really do some difficult work, putting one foot in front of the other. Like right now, I'm thinking of my father-in-law, who happens to be a Gemini sun sign, but he's just had knee replacement surgery. And you want to talk about like a hard reset there, right? And it's involving the physical body and something new there, and getting used to that. And it's hard work. The recovery is hard work. These kinds of things. So Saturn in the 9th house is in this difficult conversation with Mercury, and it's maybe giving some hard facts or just kind of being a fly in the ointment as it relates to 9th house themes of the quest that you are on in some way, higher learning, travel, foreign people and places, your philosophy or worldview, and how that can be impacted by people and places that are different from you. This can be about teaching and learning and publishing and those sorts of themes as well. So something going on there between Saturn and Mercury, the ruler of this new moon, that is feeling a little bit like, that Stephen Jenkinson quote that I read earlier on, that you kind of, and I'm paraphrasing here at this point, but you kind of have to do the adulting, right? You have to step up, and there are no guarantees about the future, but you have to do it anyway. That's kind of, the crux of it. So I'm taking a look at the chart here to see if there's anything else I wanted to mention to you, Gemini, specifically, because this is your new moon. You do have that sextile from Neptune to this lunation, right? Neptune in Pisces. And that, if you go back in past videos and you listen to the videos that I did about all the things that were going on in Pisces, Jupiter in Pisces, Venus in Pisces, all of that, where I was talking about looking for the helpers. That's the area of your chart that Neptune is still sitting in. And it is doing this work of dissolving something so that there is room for something new to come in. So, yeah, I think that's good, Gemini, for you. And if you have any comments or questions about how this new moon is impacting you specifically, then definitely leave them in the comments below. Okay, so I'm going to move on to Cancer now. Cancer, for you, the Gemini new moon is planting seeds, is something new being conceived of in your 12th house. So this 12th house has to do with how you escape whatever's going on, like the chaos of daily life. And sometimes that is intentional, right? We're escaping because we're taking a vacation or a retreat of some sort, or we're, if we're lucky enough, by like maybe even purchasing a vacation home or something like that. So it's like, or you're just deciding to spend more time in solitude and take a break from the world, or maybe social media, taking a break from social media, seeing as this is in Gemini. But it's also ways that we are removed from sort of the daily grind or daily chaos, through things like, recovery and convalescence and those sorts of things. So sometimes the 12th house very literally involves places that are kind of removed from the world, like retreat centers, rehab facilities, hospitals, hospices, long-term care facilities, something around, even like prisons, those kinds of themes. Now, of course, this isn't going to be everybody that is a Cancer rising, but that is something to keep in mind. There could be some dealing with, or something new happens that requires the involvement of some of these 12th house themes. It is a new way of retreating in some way that we may have never experienced before. It could be something along the lines of a new way of dealing with your self-sabotaging behaviors. Because the 12th house can speak to that. It's like our blind spots, what we're not, like how we can be our own worst enemy in some ways is the 12th house. The 12th house is anything hidden, unseen. It can be about endings and losses, right? Because it is the last house on the wheel. It can be about what goes on in our unconscious, in our dream life. It can be about our spiritual practices and connections as well. So, lots going on in the 12th house. And sometimes the 12th house speaks to, it's on this axis that speaks with to health. And oftentimes when we're talking about 12th house matters, it can speak to mental, emotional, spiritual health, So something new going on here in this realm. And I mean, it could be somebody's getting a new job that involves them working in one of these places. It could be somebody is having to spend more time in one of these places to like visit a family member, something like that. So, I mean, there's many directions we could take it, but it involves those 12th house themes. And then you've got Saturn over there in the 8th house in square to Mercury, which is the ruler of this new moon at the time of the new moon. So just reminding us, like I was saying in the intro, that there's hard work required. I'm not going to belabor it because listen to the intro and then you'll get the big picture here. But whatever this daunting or difficult or stern or mature, sort of karmic situation is, it is happening in the 12th house. Sorry, the 8th house. And that is about where things are beyond our control, which can feel a bit scary and unnerving, right? It is about things that are very intimate in nature, our intimate connections with other people on every level, our entanglements with other people. It can have to do with things like, on a more sort of practical level, things like our taxes, our insurance, our debt, loans, inheritance, wills, bursaries, scholarships, all of these sorts of things. So there's something going on there in that realm of life that feels like a bit of a slog. And at the time of this new moon, there's an interplay, right, between Saturn and Mercury, where it's like some rock in a hard place kind of needs to be dealt with. So I'm going to leave that there. Cancer, I'm going to move on to Leo. Leo, for you, this new moon in Gemini is happening in your 11th house. So new seeds being planted, something new being conceived of or intended that speaks to the group. So this can be friendships, or it can be organizations, associations, networks, clubs, even online communities. It can have to do with your allies and supporters, benefactors, right? People that can help you reach your goals. And the 11th house is about our hopes and dreams for the future, our vision for the future. So there's something new here. Maybe you have a new vision for the future. Maybe you're encountering somebody new, or you're communicating, right? This is in Gemini. There's an exchange of information. There's new ideas flowing between you and allies and supporters or friends in some way, people that can support you. New connections being made potentially at this time. Even, one of the things I like to speak to when I'm talking about the 11th house, because I never hear anybody else talking about this, but I've witnessed it many, many times in my own experience and in other people's, that the 11th house can sometimes be, if you have kids, it could speak to your kids' friends as well. I've seen this happen. So, that's going to pertain to very few of you probably, but just thought I'd mention it. So something new going on there. Now, at the time of this new moon, like I spoke to in the intro, we've got Saturn in Aquarius still, and it's squaring Mercury, the ruler of this new moon, Mercury, who is retrograde at the time. And Saturn, who's about to retrograde, right? And I spoke to all that in the intro, so don't skip it. But Saturn is like still the fly in the ointment there. There's something to work through, something maybe daunting or difficult or requiring loads of patience and maturity. And at this new moon, there's this tense conversation where it's kind of like, okay, like something's got to give here. I need to take some action. We need to resolve this tension. And that has to do with your 7th house. Saturn's in your 7th house of partnership, of one-to-one relationship, of the relationships you have with close friends and family members, significant other. So it could be marriage partner, potentially. It has to do with contracts and agreements in the 7th house as well. It can have to do with rivals, competitors, So something's going on there where Saturn is really requiring some patience, like I mentioned. But working through that can help get this off the ground, whatever new thing this is. It's still something new, right? Because it's a new moon happening. And remember, I said, whatever this is can culminate then in some way, shape, or form in a couple weeks' time around the full moon in Sagittarius on the 14th. But if you're playing the long game, you're looking towards the next 6 months and something sort of culminating around the December full moon in Gemini. So that's for you, Leo. And I'm going to move on to Virgo now. Virgo, for you, this new moon is planting new seeds. It's initiating something in your 10th house of career, public life, public reputation, the legacy you wish to leave, your sense of authority in the world, your own authority, your connection to authority figures in some way. This is on the parenting axis, so it can involve parents or parenting. And whatever this is has that Gemini flavor to it. We spoke to that in the intro, I won't belabor it here. And there's something playing off this full moon that's a bit more difficult or challenging or stern or requiring patience and adulting. And that's going on in the sixth house for you, because that's where Saturn is, and Saturn's in square with Mercury, who rules this new moon. And so that is about your health, or health and illness, concepts and issues around that. It has to do with how you are in service, how you are checking off the ticky boxes every day, right? Like one foot in front of the other, and how all the jobs we have to do on the day-to-day that are sometimes are paid work and sometimes not, sometimes both. The sixth house is a house of hard labor. And it can feel like those things that we have to do in life where they're not super fun, and we're not getting a lot of necessarily reward for it, or at least that's the way it appears in the moment, right? So there's something going on here that can feel like, it's a challenge to whatever the new thing is that you're trying to initiate, or that is trying to be initiated in the 10th house. So a little tight spot needs to be worked through. Saturn says we must have patience, right? And I remind you of the Stephen Jenkinson quote that I referred to in the intro. So if you haven't listened to the intro, definitely make sure you do that. Okay, so that is for you, Leo. Virgo. My bad. And I'm going to move on to Libra now. So Libra, for you, you've got the new moon in Gemini happening in your 9th house. And this is something new being conceived of, initiated, intended, that is about your philosophy and worldview. It's about some kind of larger quest that you're on. It is about teaching and learning, higher education. It can have to do with travel. And usually when we're talking about the 9th house, it's like a longer distance travel, traveling out of country. It can have to do with just people and places that are different from you, say like different cultures, different country, that kind of thing, that you can learn from. Their experiences can teach you something. Perhaps this can have to do with publishing. It can have to do with what I call armchair travel sometimes. So this can be what we're learning through books, documentaries, that sort of thing even, right? So whatever this is, there's something new here. This could be like, I can see this being like, it's the time of year where if people are applying to colleges and universities, they've been getting acceptances or what have you, or they're starting, like they have to initiate plans for that to happen. So that could be one way this plays out. This could be like travel plans being initiated. This could have to do with the initiation of something revolving, a project that you're publishing or getting, want to get sort of recognized. This can have to do with some adventure that you are going to embark on. So that's where the new moon is happening. But then there's this square between the ruler of this new moon, Mercury, and Saturn in your 5th house. Saturn sitting in your 5th house, right, in Aquarius. And so it's reminding us again of the themes that Saturn's been triggering for the last, few years for us. And for you, that's fifth house themes of how do you have fun in life, right? Pleasure, joy. Sometimes it involves our hobbies and special interests. It can involve children, your children, or children that you're somehow associated with. It can involve creative projects and creative self-expression. So there's something going on here that feels daunting, and like, somebody's or some situation is a bit of a buzzkill. Maybe I'm thinking of like you're planning a trip. It was supposed to be for pleasure, but something's, there's been a wrench thrown into that. And so it's maybe not going to be, maybe you have to do some work when you're there or something like that. It could be, this ninth, fifth house thing, I can see like empty nest syndrome in terms of like you've got a kid going away to school. And so they're growing up, Saturn and Aquarius in the fifth house. And it can feel a bit like hard for the parents to adjust, right? So something like that could be going on. This could have something to do with traveling for a creative project. So there's work involved. This can have to do with some situation that just came into mind was like, let's reverse what I had said. It's like, maybe I've known people that have been in this situation before. The parent is going off to do some work-related thing, maybe overseas, or a course of study or something like that. And then so the child is having to deal with that, right? And that can feel like responsibility, and it can be difficult, and that kind of thing, requiring some maturity. So those are the types of scenarios that I see going on, Libra, for this new moon. The new moon in the ninth house square, and the ruler of the new moon, Mercury, being squared by Saturn, right? So Mercury is in Taurus at the time of this new moon, which is where we've had eclipses recently. So I spoke about this in the intro. Definitely don't skip it. All right, we're going to move on now to Scorpio. Scorpio, for you, this new moon is culminating in your eighth house. Not culminating. It is being, initiated in your eighth house. So culminating is more of a full moon word. Initiation is a new moon word. So something's being initiated, conceived of, intended in your eighth house, which is about things beyond your control. It's about your connections, your intimate entanglements with other people. It is about things like your shared resources. So this can be like partners' resources, but it can also be things like loans, debt, insurance, taxes, scholarships, bursaries, wills, inheritance, that sort of thing. It's this house where there is a sense of loss of control, which can feel a bit scary, but there's like a transformational energy that happens in this eighth house as well, right? And so something new here. It could be something new having to do with a loan negotiation. It could have to do with you're drawing up a will, or revising your will in some way, or you're dealing with some matter of inheritance, or there is some new communication going on that involves intimacy in some way. I mean, this could be like starting therapy even. It could be things like embarking on some new study that involves, you know, what we would call like occult things, right? Like astrology, for example. It could be new information about taxes or something like that, right? Or communicating about that in some way, because it is in Gemini, ruled by Mercury. So, but it's those eighth house themes. That's where the new seeds are being planted, which will culminate in some way in a couple weeks' time at the Sagittarius full moon. But then, you know, long game, we're talking about like December, where we have the full moon in Gemini happening. So 6 months down the road. Look to that as a culmination point as well. And then you've got Saturn in your fourth house, which is squaring the ruler of this new moon, squaring Mercury. So again, we're reminding of those Saturnian themes that we've been working through. And I talked all about that in the intro, so don't skip it. But specifically as it relates to this new moon, you know, something having to do with home, family, roots, ancestry, your tribe in some way, right? People who feel like family, parents, parenting, your sense of emotional security. These are all fourth house themes. There's hard work being done here. There's maturity and responsibility required. There can feel like there's something a bit daunting that's going on here. And, you know, it's kind of like this needs to be worked out, worked through. There's a tight spot you need to get out of. There's action that needs to be taken to resolve the tension, decisions that need to be made, that sort of thing, right? That have to do with what's transpiring at the time of this new moon. So that's definitely enough to go on, I think, Scorpio, for you. And I'm going to move on to Sagittarius now. So Sagittarius, for you, the new moon is conceiving of something new, bringing something new into your awareness or experience. You may be intending something new that revolves around one-to-one relationship. So significant other, you know, marriage partner, if that pertains to you, close friends, family members, business partners or associates. It can have to do with contracts and agreements. It can have to do with rivals. So, you know, people you're in competition with. Something new here, getting off the ground, some new experience or information or new, you know, whatever it is, new relationship, potentially, new way of doing relationship, new experience in relationship can be happening. And so, or it could be when we're talking about the seventh house, sometimes this is something going on in the life of your partner or business partner or one of those people, but usually it's the partner or the significant other, right? Somebody that is you would consider a significant person in your life. Something new can be starting for them or being initiated for them when it's in the seventh house as well, which, you know, will then directly impact you. And whatever this is, there's a bit of a tight spot to work through because of that Saturn in your third house that's squaring the ruler of this lunation, that's squaring Mercury, right, at the time of this new moon. And so that Saturn in Aquarius energy is nothing new, but it's just kind of triggering again. And this time it's that tight spot between, you know, one-to-one relationship or those seventh house themes that I mentioned, and third house of communications, of your immediate environment, you know, and all the sort of busyness that goes on the day-to-day. It can be about siblings, teammates, cousins, neighbors, community members, the interactions you have on the day-to-day, the travels you take, you know, the short jaunts, like the commutes or even the short weekend trips. Again, like communications, commerce, marketing, teaching, learning. Usually when we're talking third house, we're talking about things like elementary school or early learning or high school even. And the ninth house is more beyond that, right? Or learning the basics of something would be third house as well. So there's something going on there that's kind of feeling like a bit of a slog, and it is requiring some maturity and some hard work, and it can feel a bit daunting. And somehow it is related to this new moon in Gemini in your 7th house. So I'm going to remind you to listen to the introduction because there's more in there that pertains, but I'm not going to repeat it all for every single sign, right? So definitely listen to the intro, Sag, and hopefully that gives you lots to go on. Okay, so we're going to move on to Capricorn now. Capricorn, for you, the new moon in Gemini is happening in your 6th house. So something new being initiated, conceived of, intended by you or the universe that revolves around health and wellness, hard work, how you are in service, the kind of daily grind, the sense of hard labor that you do. And sometimes, it's our work, it's our paid work. Sometimes it's work that we're not paid for. It can have to do with pets as well in the 6th house. So, and issues around illness, health, that kind of thing. So there is some new information, idea, concept, situation, communication that's transpiring there, in that 6th house that will culminate in some way at the full moon in Sagittarius, which is on the 14th of June. But then, when we're playing the long game, we're talking about the full moon in Gemini that's happening in December, early December of 2022. So 6 months down the road, look to some kind of a culmination point there as well. Now, whatever this new situation is, there is a bit of a fly in the ointment coming from Saturn in the 2nd house for you, because Saturn is in a square with Mercury. Mercury's in Taurus at the time of this new moon, but Mercury rules the lunation, right? Mercury's the ruler of Gemini. Talked about all this in the intro. Don't skip the intro. So this involves your personal finances, the money you make from your skills and talents, money you make from your job or your business or what have you. It has to do with your resources in general. So not only your finances and your material resources and possessions, but your time and energy as well, right? Those are resources too. It has to do with survival instincts, getting our basic needs met. It has to do with what you value and place worth on, including your sense of self-worth. So there can feel something a bit daunting there, a bit like it calls for maturity and responsibility, those Saturnian words. And it involves those 6th house themes that I spoke to. Whatever this new beginning is can require a bit of a tight spot to work out of, right? To take some action there to resolve the tension. So that's what's going on for you, Capricorn. And definitely listen to the intro for all the layers. And I'm going to move on to Aquarius now. Aquarius, for you, you've got the new moon happening in your 5th house. So some new seeds of intention being planted there, something being initiated, something being conceived of that revolves around themes of children. So your children or children you're somehow associated with, or, child, like pregnancy, childbirth, that kind of thing, can also involve your creativity in some way. So creative projects, entrepreneurship. It can have to do with hobbies, special interests, how you have fun in life, what brings you pleasure and joy. These are 5th house themes. So there's something new transpiring here. And it will culminate, in some way in 2 weeks' time at the Sagittarius full moon. But when we're playing the longer game, we're looking down the road to the Gemini full moon in the same area of your chart. That will happen in December of 2022. So the new thing is in that area of life, but we've got this square. Saturn is in your sign still, right? Aquarius, like this is old news at this point. But it keeps triggering different things. It keeps like, there's work to be done. There's work to be done. You're not going to get off that easy, kind of thing, is Saturn's MO. But Saturn wants us to put in the work so we can feel a sense of accomplishment, ultimately. And I spoke a little bit to that in the intro. Don't skip that. And for you, Saturn moving through your sign is really can feel difficult as a whole, because it directly involves you and all the pieces of you, your body, your mind, your personality, how you come at life, how you steer your ship through life, how people kind of perceive you, right? This kind of thing. When we have things going on in the first house, they can impact all areas of life because it's about us. So there's something going on here, Aquarius, over the last couple of years. And now at the time of this new moon, it's like something about whatever's going on with you, and it could be your physical body, it could be your approach to things, or how you're perceived in some way, that is a tight spot to work through in relation to the new seeds that are being planted here in the fifth area of life, right? And so I can see things like, like something that comes to mind is like trying to get pregnant, but it can be difficult. And so there may be some interventions required. I can see things like something being initiated in the life of your kids that somehow involves, you and how you approach life in some way. I can see things like a new way to have fun, because it's in the fifth house, new pleasures, but they require in some way, like there's a challenge that you need to deal with, maybe some hard work, hard labor, who knows, that's hard on the body, right? Or something like that is required of you, that takes place at the time of this, that's part of this new beginning in some way. I have a niece who's an Aquarius, and she was into like bodybuilding at one point, and I can see that that reminds me of this in some way. Fifth house, our hobbies, our interests, are what brings us pleasure, what we do for fun, and then like the first house is us and our body and that sort of thing. So like that's one of the scenarios that comes to mind for some reason. But those are all things that you can play off of and apply to your own life and think about, what is being planted in the fifth house that requires on some level like hard work, maturity, responsibility, all of those, maybe some obstacles to be overcome by me, because Saturn's in the first house for you. So that's for you, Aquarius. And I'm going to move on now to speak to Pisces, because Pisces, this new moon is happening in your fourth house. So new seeds of intention being planted by you or the universe, right? Something new coming into your awareness or experience, something new being conceived of or initiated that revolves around themes of home, family, roots, ancestry, the legacy you have been left, parents, parenting, real estate. I don't know if I said that. Your sense of emotional security, something involving those themes. Some new beginning is happening here, and some new experience. And it is being challenged a little bit by something that's going on with Saturn in the 12th house, because Saturn is in square to Mercury at the time of this new moon, like I spoke to in the intro, and Mercury, who is in Taurus at the time of the new moon, but is squaring Saturn, right? So Mercury and Saturn are squaring each other. So it's a bit of a tense conversation and some kind of obstacle that needs to be overcome or worked through. some trial, you know, and it involves the 12th house. And that is about retreat from the chaos of daily life in some way, whether that's chosen or not chosen, you know, it's put upon us somehow. So it can be things like, you know, you're being asked to retreat because you're having to spend a lot of time in a long-term care facility, maybe with a family member, or there's some, like, somebody's recovering from surgery, or there is some, like, this can involve any place that you can think of that is removed from kind of daily life in terms of retreating. Spiritual retreat centers, vacations, spending time in like solitude, you know, just away from the world, off social media even. But even things like hospitals, hospices, long-term care facilities, rehab facilities, detention centers, these kinds of things can be 12th house related as well. The 12th house it can be about completions, about endings, about things that go on in our unconscious that we're not aware of, like, or like blind spots, things that we can't, you know, we're not consciously aware of, we can't see. Secrets are sometimes 12th house. You know, you're getting the vibe here, right? Spiritual life, our dream life, anything unseen or tucked away from the world, or that like brings us out of the daily grind somehow, right? It can be about our mental, emotional, spiritual health as well in the 12th house. So all of that to say, Saturn is causing some trials and tribulations there. And it's implicated in this new moon. There's a tight spot to work through, some difficulties and obstacles to overcome, and it's directly related to whatever new scenario is happening in the 4th house. So that's for you, Pisces. Listen to the intro, lots more info there for you to apply to this. And I'm going to move on to Aries now, where we've got this new moon happening in your 3rd house. So Aries, for you, the new start, the initiation, the new seeds being planted, the new thing being conceived of in some way revolves around your immediate environment and the people in it, and all the things that you do on the day-to-day, meaning like the communication exchanges, right? So this can be about communication. It can be about commutes and short distance travel. It can be about siblings and cousins and neighbors and community members and peers, those people that you would consider sort of on the even playing field to you. It can be about our like teaching and learning earlier concepts, right? Like, so elementary school, early years, high school, learning the 101 of something, communications in some way, writing, speaking, thoughts, ideas, self-talk. Oh, there's so many things. That 3rd house is a very busy place. So it is our kind of like, also the 3rd house is like our rituals, right? That we do on the day-to-day. So you can think about that. Something new getting off the ground here, and it will culminate in some way, shape, or form in 2 weeks' time at the full moon in Sagittarius on the 14th of June, but then playing the longer game, culminating in 6 months' time at the full moon in Gemini on December 7th. So 2022, you know, so you can look ahead to that if it's a longer term sort of project or what have you that's happening. So in relation to this, though, we've got Saturn in your 11th house in Aquarius in square to Mercury. Mercury is the ruler of this lunation. I spoke all to that in the intro, and Mercury's in Taurus at the time of this new moon. So Mercury and Saturn are kind of in a tense conversation, right? Something in your 11th house you've been having to deal with for the last 2-3 years now, because Saturn's been moving through there, and Saturn once again is triggering, and this time is like requiring, you know, the hard work, bringing a sense of maturity, responsibility, difficulty, challenge, sternness, coldness, perhaps. You know, those are Saturnian words. But even feeling somewhat sort of karmic or fated when it comes to Saturn often as well. And because the nodes are implicated, like I spoke to in the intro. And this has to do with your 11th house of the group, of friendships, right? Of groups and associations that you're involved in somehow. Can be online or in person. You know, it can have to do with your allies and supporters and benefactors, people that can help you get where you want to go. The 11th house speaks to our hopes and dreams for the future, right? Our future vision. So something's going on here involving those third house themes, like I mentioned, and Saturn being a bit of a fly in the ointment here, requiring, like, there's a tight spot that needs to be worked out, maybe difficult conversations between friends and supporters in some way, maybe some kind of communication or learning experience, you know, any of those third house themes, something new there, but then challenged by Saturn in the 11th house. And it's a tight spot that you kind of need to wiggle your way out of, right? Around this time of the new moon, in order for that new thing to really take hold. So that's for you, Aries. I'm going to leave it there. Leave me a comment or a question in you know, the comments below if you want more sort of insight into particular themes for your own particular situation. So I feel like Mercury retrograde is scrambling my brain a little right now. I'm going to move on to last but not least. In this case, we've got Taurus. So Taurus, for you, this new moon is happening in your second house. New seeds of intention being planted by you or the universe. Something new being conceived of, something new being initiated that revolves around your finances, second house, your personal resources. So that can be your money, your material possessions, but also your time and energy. It's about your survival instincts, about getting your basic needs met. It is about what you place worth and value on, including your sense of self-worth in the second house. So some new thing happening here, transpiring here, like a new project, a new in the second house, it can even be like, because it's our resources and how our basic needs, it can even be like our food supply. Like I think of like planting a new garden, for some reason just popped into my head. Or it could be some new material possession, you know, or something revolving around that, a new sense of values that is being initiated around now, a conversation about your resources, because this is in Gemini, you know, an air sign ruled by Mercury, could have something to do with that. And whatever this is that speaks to the second house themes, it's being challenged in some way by Saturn in your 10th house, because, you know, Saturn's been doing that work there in your 10th house for the last 2-3 years. But in this particular case, it's in square with the ruler of this new moon, which happens to be in your sign at the time of the new moon. Mercury's in Taurus, but it's retrograde and it's in a square, right? Mercury rules the new moon. It's in a square to Saturn. And so there's some challenge being presented, or some call for maturity or responsibility, or some obstacle to be overcome, some sternness or coldness being experienced. And that is coming about in your 10th house of career, of your ambitions, of your public reputation and persona, of the legacy you wish to leave, of your relationship to authority and authority figures. Could be your own authority as well. Parents, potentially. So these are the themes that Saturn is really, requiring you to work through. And it's not easy work. And it's, so there's some interplay going on here where it's like, maybe, you want the raise, to make more resources, second house, but there's a challenge there. Somebody is challenging you, or there's something in the career sphere that's feeling quite challenging and cold and hard. And it's impacting your ability to get your needs met, right? Or your resources in some way. You want to do something new, but there's a challenge to overcome that has to do with the 10th house. So you can see how that interplay is going on there for you, Taurus. And definitely, listen to the introduction, because there's other pieces. I talked about the Neptune piece and such in the intro that I don't have time to repeat for every sign. So definitely listen to the intro, and that will give you all the layers of information that you need to navigate this new moon, which will culminate on the 14th at a full moon in Sagittarius, 14th of June. But also, if we're playing the long game, look down the road 6 months to the full moon in Gemini that happens in December of 2022, where whatever new seeds are planted here reach a blossoming at that point, right? So I'm going to leave that there, and I'm going to see you for your horoscopes in a couple weeks' time. And hopefully, if life allows, things are a bit crunchy right now, I'll get back next week for an astro nugget. That's my intention, but we'll see. Okay, so take good care, and I'll see you soon. Don't forget to visit me at my website, astrologymaven.com.